The world doesn't always break you with a single blow. Sometimes it's 1,000 tiny cuts, whispers, glances, rules dressed up as kindness that carve into your soul until you're left raw, bleeding, and wondering how you ever thought you belonged. That's what I learned the day I watched my son, Eli, shrink under the weight of a stranger's cruelty. And that's what I remembered the moment I decided to burn their world to the ground. It started with a flyer, glossy and smug, slipped under every door in our gated community of Crestwood Hills. Annual neighborhood picnic, it declared in bold, cheerful font, promising food, fun, and family-friendly vibes at the community pavilion. The Crestwood Homeowners Association, led by the impeccable Vanessa Hargrove, had planned it down to the last paper napkin. I should have known better. I'd lived here long enough to smell the venom beneath their polished smiles. But Eli, my 10-year-old, had seen the flyer on the kitchen counter and lit up like a firefly. "Can we go, Dad?" he'd asked, his voice bright with a hope I hadn't heard in months. How could I say no? Eli wasn't like the other kids in Crestwood. Not because of his heart, which was bigger than the sun, or his laugh, which could make you forget the world's sharp edges. No, it was the chair. A sleek, black wheelchair he'd been tethered to since a car accident 2 years ago stole the use of his legs. He was 7 when it happened. A drunk driver, a rainy night, and a split second that changed everything. His mother didn't make it. I buried her while Eli fought for his life in the ICU, tubes snaking from his small body like roots, refusing to let go. He survived, but the world he woke up to wasn't the one he'd known. The scars on his legs were hidden beneath blankets, but the real wounds were in the way people looked at him now, like he was less. Like his chair was a wall they couldn't see past. Crestwood wasn't a place for people like Eli. It was a neighborhood of manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and unspoken rules about who fit the mold. The Hoa enforced those rules with fines, letters, and Vanessa Hargrove's icy stare. She was the queen of Crestwood, a woman in her late 40s with a platinum bob, tailored blouses, and a smile that could cut glass. She didn't just run the Hoa, she wielded it like a scepter, deciding who was worthy of her perfect little kingdom. I'd felt her judgment before: fines for my untrimmed hedges, a warning about Ellie's ramp, clashing with the neighborhood's aesthetic. But I paid the fines, kept my head down, and told myself we could survive here. For Ellie's sake, I wanted to believe it. That morning, I dressed Eli in his favorite blue hoodie, the one with a rocket ship on the chest. He'd spent the last 2 years relearning the world: physical therapy, new schools, kids who stared, and adults who whispered. But he still loved rockets, still dreamed of stars, still asked me if he could be an astronaut someday. "Why not?" I'd say, ruffling his hair. "You're already flying higher than most." He'd grin, but I saw the doubt in his eyes, the way he'd glance at his chair and then away, like he was trying to outrun a truth he couldn't escape. We rolled out the door, the sun warm on our faces. The pavilion was a short walk, but I felt Eli tense as we approached. The hum of voices grew louder, kids running across the grass, balloons bobbing in the breeze. "What if they stare, Dad?" he whispered, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. I knelt beside him, my knees sinking into the soft earth. "Then we stare back, kid, and we don't blink." He nodded, his jaw tight, and for a moment, I saw the boy he'd been before the accident: fearless, ready to take on the world. I pushed his chair forward, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. I thought we were walking into a picnic. I didn't know we were stepping into a battlefield. The pavilion was a sea of plastic smiles and potluck dishes. Long tables groaned under casseroles, fruit trays, and pitchers of lemonade. A banner stretched across the entrance: "Crestwood Cares." I wanted to laugh. The air smelled of sunscreen and charred hot dogs, and a Bluetooth speaker blared pop music that felt too bright for the tension coiling in my gut. Vanessa Hargrove stood at the center of it all, her silk scarf fluttering like a flag of authority. She was flanked by her usual entourage: Marjorie, the treasurer with a pinched face, and Todd, the secretary who nodded at everything she said. Her eyes locked onto us as we entered, and I felt the air shift. Like the moment before a storm breaks, Ellie's chair rolled smoothly over the concrete, but every eye in the room seemed to follow the sound of its wheels. I guided him to a table near the edge, away from the crowd. A few neighbors offered tight smiles, the kind that said, "We see you, but we don't know what to do with you." Eli kept his eyes on his lap, his fingers twisting the hem of his hoodie. I leaned down. "Pancakes or hot dogs?" I asked, trying to keep it light. He shrugged, his voice barely audible. "Whatever's fine." I hated that Tenethi one he used when he was trying to disappear. Vanessa's voice sliced through the chatter, amplified by a cheap microphone. "Welcome, Crestwood family," she chirped, her smile as sharp as a blade. "We're here to celebrate our community, our standards, our unity." Her eyes swept the room, lingering on us for a fraction too long. "Let's keep today uplifting, shall we? No distractions, no disruptions." The word landed like a stone, and I felt Eli shrink beside me. I placed a hand on his shoulder, my jaw clenching. "If she says one word about my son." But she didn't. Not yet. She glided toward the refreshment table, her heels clicking like a metronome. I grabbed a plate, piling it with pancakes and a drizzle of syrup, hoping food would anchor Ellie's mood. He picked at it, his eyes darting around the room. A group of kids ran past, chasing a soccer ball. One of them, a boy with a buzz cut, slowed down to stare. "Why's he in that thing?" he asked, loud enough for half the pavilion to hear. His mother, a woman in yoga pants, yanked him away, whispering something about manners. Ellie's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "It's okay," I said softly, leaning close. "He's just curious." "He's not," Eli muttered, his voice thick. "He thinks I'm weird." I wanted to march over and shake sense into that kid, but I stayed put. "You're not weird. You're Eli. And Ellie's awesome." He gave me a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I scanned the room, my gaze landing on Vanessa. She was pouring lemonade from a glass pitcher, her movements deliberate, her smile fixed. She caught me watching and raised an eyebrow, as if daring me to make a scene. I turned back to Eli, forcing a grin. "Eat your pancakes, Rocket Man. We've got stars to chase later." The moment felt fragile, like a glass balancing on the edge of a table. I should have known it wouldn't last. Vanessa didn't just let things slide, she orchestrated them. And she'd already decided Eli was a flaw in her perfect picture of Crestwood. It happened fast, the way cruelty always does. 1 minute, Eli was sipping lemonade, his shoulders starting to relax. The next, Vanessa was striding toward our table, the pitcher still in her hand, her smile a mask of venom. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She stopped a foot away, her eyes fixed on Ellie's chair, then his face, then the way his hands rested on the armrests, as if his very existence offended her. "You must be Eli," she said, her voice syrupy, loud enough for nearby tables to turn. "It's so brave of you to come out today." The word brave dripped with condescension, like she was praising a dog for sitting still. Eli froze, his eyes dropping to his lap. I felt my pulse spike, my hands curling into fists under the table. "He's here to enjoy the picnic," I said, my voice low but firm, "like everyone else." Vanessa's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "Of course, but we do have standards to maintain. This is a family event, and we wouldn't want anything to unsettle the children." She tilted her head toward Ellie's chair, as if it were a bomb about to detonate. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A woman at the next table leaned toward her husband, muttering something behind her hand. Ellie's face flushed, his fingers gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. "Say what you mean, Vanessa," I said, standing slowly, my voice cutting through the hum of the crowd. "You've got a problem with my son being here?" Her lips twitched, a predator sensing weakness. "I'm simply saying that some accommodation," she gestured vaguely at Ellie's chair, "can be disruptive. We've had complaints. Parents are concerned about safety, accessibility, appearances." She said the last word like it was a prayer, her eyes raking over Ellie's chair like it was a stain on her pristine world. "Complaints?" I stepped closer, my voice rising. "From who?" "You." She didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted the pitcher, her fingers tightening around the handle. "Let's keep this civil," she said, her tone mocking. "No need to make a scene in front of your son." She glanced at Eli, and that's when she did it. With a flick of her wrist, she tilted the pitcher, and a stream of lemonade gold, spiked with chunks of fruit, powered directly onto Ellie's lap. He gasped, his body jerking back as the liquid soaked his hoodie, his pants, his hands. The crowd went silent, a collective intake of breath. Ellie's eyes widened, not from pain but from humiliation, his face crumpling as he tried to wipe the sticky mess from his legs. "Oops," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with fake apology. "Clumsy me." She set the pitcher down with a deliberate clink, her smile unwavering. "Maybe next time, you'll consider what's best for everyone." The world tilted. I saw Ellie's hands tremble, his breath hitching as he tried to hold back tears. I saw the crowd, frozen, some staring, some looking away, none moving to help. And I saw Vanessa, standing there like a queen who'd just won a war. Something inside me snapped, not broke, but snapped like a wire pulled too tight, sparking and ready to ignite. "You think that's funny?" I said, my voice low, shaking with rage. I stepped toward her, closing the gap until I was inches from her face. "You think you can humiliate a kid and walk away?" Vanessa's smile faltered, but she held her ground. "Don't make this bigger than it is," she hissed. "He shouldn't be here if he can't handle it." That was it. The spark caught, and the fire roared. I grabbed the edge of the table beside her, flipping it with one hard shove. Plates crashed, cups shattered, and the crowd gasped as the table hit the ground. Vanessa stumbled back, her heels catching on the mess. "You're done," I said, my voice a growl. "You don't get to hurt my son and walk away." She laughed a sharp, nervous bark. "You're threatening me? In front of all these witnesses? I'm the president of this hoa. I decide what happens here." "Not anymore," I said. And then I moved. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just acted. My hand shot out, grabbing the front of her scarf, twisting it just enough to make her gasp. The pavilion went dead silent, the kind of silence that hums with anticipation. I didn't care. I dragged her toward the center of the room, where a folding table held a massive punch bowl filled with some neon red concoction. She struggled, her nails clawing at my arm, but I was stronger, fueled by a rage I hadn't felt since the night I sat in the hospital, waiting to hear if Eli would live. "You like making people feel small," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "Let's see how you like it." I shoved her forward, her hip slamming into the table. The punch bowl wobbled, and before she could recover, I grabbed it with both hands and upended it over her head. Red liquid cascaded down, soaking her blouse, her scarf, her perfect hair. She screamed, a high, piercing sound that echoed off the pavilion's rafters. The crowd gasped, some stepping back, others pulling out their phones. I didn't care. Let them film. Let the world see. Vanessa flailed, slipping on the wet floor, her arms windmilling as she tried to wipe the punch from her face. "You lunatic," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You'll pay for this." "Pay?" I stepped closer, towering over her. "You poured lemonade on a 10-year-old in a wheelchair because you think he's beneath you. You don't get to talk about paying." She scrambled to her feet, her face a mess of smeared makeup and dripping punch. "I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you for everything you have." "Go ahead," I said, my voice cold. "But first, say his name." She blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "What?" "Say his name." I stepped closer, my fists clenched. The crowd was a blur now, a sea of faces watching, waiting. Eli was still at the table, his hands shaking, his eyes locked on me. I made a promise to him in that moment. He'd never feel powerless again. "Eli," she spat, her voice trembling with rage and fear. "Too late," I said. I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the refreshment table. She screamed, but I didn't stop. There, in the center, was a tray of cupcakes, perfect, frosted, ranged like a work of art. I picked one up, the frosting sticking to my fingers, and smashed it into her face. The crowd erupted gasps, laughs, a few cheers. Vanessa stumbled back, clawing at the frosting, her eyes wide with shock. "You're finished," I said, dropping the crushed cupcake. "You don't get to hurt people anymore." She lunged at me, her nails aiming for my face, but I sidestepped, letting her stumble into the table. The crowd was alive now, phones raised, voices buzzing. A teenage girl nearby shouted, "It's live. Punchwich is trending." I didn't know what that meant, but I saw the fear in Vanessa's eyes, the realization that her kingdom was crumbling. I turned back to Eli, his face pale but his eyes steady. "You okay, Rocket Man?" I asked, kneeling beside him. He nodded, a small, fierce nod that told me he was still fighting. I stood, facing the crowd. Anyone else want to tell my son he doesn't belong? No one spoke. No one moved. Vanessa was on her knees, sobbing, her perfect facade shattered. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about Eli. It was about every person she'd ever find, shamed or pushed out of her perfect little world. The fire I'd started wasn't just for my son, it was for all of them. The pavilion was chaos. People shouted, phones flashed, and Vanessa knelt in a puddle of punch. Her pride as broken as the table I'd flipped. Marjorie, the treasurer, rushed to her side, muttering about lawsuits and bylaws. But her voice was drowned out by the crowd's murmurs. Todd, the secretary, stood frozen, his clipboard trembling in his hands. I didn't care about them. I cared about Eli, who was still gripping his chair, his eyes darting between me and the mess I'd made. "Dad," he whispered, his voice small but steady. "Is she okay?" I knelt beside him, my hands shaking with adrenaline. "She's not hurt, Eli. Not like you were." I brushed a sticky strand of hair from his forehead. "She's just learning what it feels like to be seen." He nodded, his lips pressed tight. I wanted to scoop him up, carry him out of this place, but I knew he needed to see this through. He needed to know his dad wouldn't let monsters win. Vanessa staggered to her feet, her face a mask of rage and humiliation. "You think this is over?" she screamed, her voice hoarse. "I run this community. You're nothing to nobody who thinks he can play hero. Then why's no one helping you?" I said, my voice calm but sharp. The crowd parted as I stepped forward, my eyes locked on hers. "You've fined people for their grass being too long, threatened families for their kids' toys in the yard, made everyone afraid to breathe wrong. And now you've hurt my son. You think you're untouchable. Look round." She did. Her eyes swept the pavilion, taking in the face some angry, some gleeful, all watching her fall. A man in a polo shirt stepped forward, his voice shaking but firm. "You fined me $500 for my dog's bark last year. My wife was in chemo, and you didn't care." A woman with a stroller joined him. "You sent me a letter saying my mailbox was unsightly. It was rusted because I couldn't afford to replace it after my husband left." One by one, they spoke. The dam broke, and years of resentment poured out. Vanessa's face crumpled, her hands clawing at her soaked scarf. "You're all ungrateful," she shouted. "I made this place perfect. You made it a prison," I said. I turned to the crowd, my voice rising. "If you're done being afraid, stand up. Right now." Chairs scraped, feet shuffled. Slowly, then all at once, the pavilion rose. Even Marjorie and Todd stepped back, their faces pale. Vanessa's eyes widened, her breath hitching. She was alone, and she knew it. From the back, a kid with a phone shouted, "It's at 1,000,000 views. Punchwitch is viral." The crowd buzzed, and Vanessa's phone, still clutched in her hand, buzzed with notifications. She looked at it, her face paling as she saw the flood of messages, tags, and screenshots. "Officers," a voice called. Two cops pushed through the crowd, their faces grim. They'd been called by someone in the crowd, alerted by the growing chaos. One of them, a woman with a tight bun, scanned the scene, her eyes landing on Ellie's soaked clothes. Then Vanessa's dripping figure. "Sir," she said to me, "step back. We need to talk to her." She poured lemonade on my son, I said, my voice steady. "On purpose, in front of everyone. We've got footage," a teenager piped up, holding up his phone. "It's all over X." The officer nodded, turning to Vanessa. "Ma'am, you're coming with us." Vanessa shrieked, her arms flailing as the second officer cuffed her. "This is outrageous. I'm the victim here. Tell it to the judge," the officer said, leading her toward the exit. The crowd parted, some clapping, others filming. As the patrol car doors slammed shut, Vanessa's screams faded, but her legacy lingered like a stain. I knelt beside Eli, my hands on his shoulders. "You're okay," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You're stronger than all of them." He looked at me, his eyes shimmering with tears, but also something else of pride. "You didn't let her win," he said. "Never," I promised. And as the crowd dispersed, phones still flashing, I knew this wasn't the end. Vanessa's kingdom was crumbling, but the fight was just beginning. The pavilion was a battlefield of broken cups and shattered illusions, the air thick with the sticky sweet stench of spilled punch and the buzz of a crowd that had finally found its voice. Vanessa Hargrove was gone, hauled away in handcuffs, her screams echoing like a fading siren. But the war wasn't over. Her absence left a vacuum, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me as I knelt beside Eli, his wheelchair gleaming under the pavilion's harsh lights. His blue hoodie was still damp, his hands clenched in his lap, but his ice toast fierce. Star-chasing I shelled a spark I hadn't seen in years. He was shaken, but he wasn't broken. Not anymore. I wiped a smear of lemonade from his cheek, my fingers trembling with the adrenaline still coursing through me. "You okay, Rocket Man?" I asked again, softer this time, searching his face for the truth. He nodded, his voice small but steady. "You didn't let her win, Dad." His words hit me like a punch, not because they hurt, but because they reminded me why I'd done what I did. Not for revenge, not for the crowd, but for him. For the boy who deserved to be seen as more than his chair. "We're not done yet," I said, standing and scanning the room. The crowd was still buzzing, some filming, others whispering, a few starting to clean up the mess I'd made. Marjorie, the Hoa treasurer, hovered near the edge of the pavilion, her pinched face pale as she clutched her purse like a lifeline. Todd, the secretary, was frantically typing on his phone, probably drafting some panicked email to the Hoa board. They were rattled, but they weren't gone. Vanessa's machine was still humming, and I wasn't about to let it keep running. I pushed Ellie's chair toward the exit, the wheels rolling smoothly over the concrete. A few neighbors stepped forward, offering awkward smiles or murmured apologies. "That was awful," a woman in a sundress said, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, Eli." He nodded, his lips tight, but I could tell he didn't trust their words. Not yet. I didn't either. Outside, the sun was still high, the breeze carrying the scent of cut grass and distant barbecues. The patrol car was gone, but a small crowd lingered. Reporters, neighbors, kids with phones. A local news van was pulling into the lot, its antenna swaying like a vulture circling. I felt Eli tense beside me. "They're gonna want to talk to you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let them," I said, my jaw tight. "This isn't about hiding anymore." A reporter, a young guy with a microphone and a too eager smile, jogged toward us. "Mr. Carter, I'm with Channel 7. Can you tell us what happened in there? People are calling it the Punch Witch incident." He thrust the mic in my face, his cameraman zooming in. I glanced at Eli, his eyes wide but steady. "You want the story?" I said, my voice low and deliberate. Vanessa Hargrove, president of the Crestwood Hoa, poured lemonade on my 10-year-old son because she thought his wheelchair didn't fit her perfect little neighborhood. She humiliated him in front of everyone, and when I called her out, she tried to play the victim. That's what happened. The reporter's eyes widened, his pen scribbling furiously. "And the punch bowl, the table, witnesses say you." I gave her a taste of her own medicine. I cut in, my voice sharp. "She's been bullying this community for years, fines, threats, shaming anyone who didn't fit her mold. Today, she picked the wrong kid to mess with." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others filming. The reporter hesitated, then turned to Eli. "Eli, how do you feel about what happened?" My hand tightened on Ellie's chair, ready to shut it down, but he raised his hand slightly. "I'm okay," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "I just wanted to eat pancakes like everyone else." The simplicity of it, the raw truth in his words, hit the crowd like a wave. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. The reporter swallowed, clearly unprepared for a 10-year-old's honesty. "Thank you, Eli," he said, then turned back to me. "Do you plan to press charges?" "Damn right," I said. "Against Vanessa, the Hoa, and anyone who let her think she could get away with this. This isn't just about my son. It's about every person she's hurt." The crowd erupted, claps, cheers, a few shouts of agreement. The reporter scrambled to keep up, but I was done. I pushed Eli toward our car, ignoring the calls for more comments. We needed to get home, away from the chaos, where I could check his chair, change his clothes, and make sure he was really okay. But as we rolled across the grass, I felt the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just a moment, it was a spark, and Crestwood was dry kindling. Back at the house, I helped Eli change into dry clothes. His rocket ship hoodie swapped for a plain gray t-shirt. He was quiet, his hands fidgeting as I checked his chair for damage. The lemonade had sticky residue on the wheels, but nothing permanent, unlike the damage Vanessa had tried to inflict on his spirit. "You want to talk about it?" I asked, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. He shrugged, his eyes on the table. "She didn't even say sorry." "She won't," I said, my voice tight. "People like her don't. They think they're above it." He looked up, his brown eyes searching mine. "Why do they hate me? Because of the chair?" My heart cracked. I leaned forward, my hands on his. "They don't hate you, Eli. They're scared of what they don't understand. You're stronger than they'll ever be, and that scares them." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully believe me. I wanted to fix it, to erase the hurt, but all I could do was sit with him. Let him feel the weight of my promise. I'd fight for him, no matter what. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I stood, my guard up, expecting another reporter or an HOA lackey with a cease and desist letter. Instead, it was Mrs. Delgado, the widow from 2 houses down. She was in her 60s, her gray hair pulled back in a bun, her hands clutching a casserole dish. "I saw what happened," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I was there, in the back. I should have said something sooner, but I brought this for Eli." She held out the dish, her eyes glistening. "It's his favorite mac and cheese with extra cheddar." I took the dish, surprised by the warmth of the gesture. "Thank you, Mrs. Delgado. You didn't have to." "I did," she cut in. "Vanessa fined me last year for my roses being too wild. She said they lowered property values. My husband planted those roses before he passed. She didn't care. And today, what she did to your boy," she shook her head, her lips trembling. "You did what we all wanted to do." I didn't know what to say. I'd always thought Crestwood was a cold place, but here was proof it wasn't all bad. "Comin'," I said, stepping aside. "Ellie'd love to see you." She smiled, stepping inside. Ellie's face lit up when he saw her. "Mrs. D," he said, rolling toward her. "Did you bring the cheesy stuff?" "You know it," she said, ruffling his hair. For a moment, the room felt lighter, like the world wasn't all sharp edges. But I knew it wouldn't last. Vanessa's arrest was just the beginning, and the whole wasn't going to collapse without a fight. By evening, the story was everywhere. My phone buzzed with notification texts from neighbors, emails from lawyers offering their services, and a flood of social media tags. Punch, which was trending on X, with clips of the incident racking up millions of views. Some called me a hero, others a vigilante. A few called me worse. I didn't care about the labels. I cared about the messages from neighbors, people I'd barely spoken to, sharing their own stories of Vanessa's tyranny. Fines for kids' bikes left in driveways. Letters threatening eviction over unmowed lawns. One woman said Vanessa had reported her to child services because her autistic daughter had meltdowns in the front yard. The stories piled up, each one a brick in the wall of resentment Vanessa had built. I put my phone down when Eli went to bed, his small frame curled under a blanket printed with constellations. I sat in the living room, the TV muted, showing a news segment with my face and Vanessa's smeared in red punch. The headline read, "Hoa President Arrested After Assault on Child." I turned it off, my head pounding. I'd wanted justice, but this felt bigger, messier. The Hoa wasn't just Vanessa, it was a system, a machine that thrived on fear, and I just kicked it in the teeth. The next morning, I woke to a knock on the door. It was early, the sky still gray. I opened it to find Marjorie, the treasurer, standing on my porch, her hands twisting nervously. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "What do you want?" She glanced around, like she was afraid someone was watching. "The board were meeting today. Emergency session. We need to address what happened." "You mean you need to cover your asses?" I said, my voice flat. Her face flushed. "It's not like that. Vanessa, she went too far. We know that. But the Hoa has to keep running. We're prepared to issue a statement, maybe an apology." "An apology?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You think a press release fixes what she did to my son? What you all let her do to this neighborhood? Marjorie flinched. I didn't know she'd. You knew. I cut in. You all knew she was a bully. You sat in those meetings, nodded along, let her fine people into submission. You didn't stop her when she poured lemonade on a kid in a wheelchair. Don't stand here pretending you're innocent. She looked down, her hands shaking. I'm stepping down, she said finally. So is Todd. We can't keep doing this. Then dissolve it, I said, my voice hard. The whole damn hoa. It's rotten, and you know it. She shook her head, her voice trembling. It's not that simple. There are contracts, bylaws, legal. To hell with your bylaws, I snapped. You want to fix this? Tear it down. Start over. Or I'll do it for you. She backed away, her eyes wide. You don't understand what you're starting. I understand enough, I said, slamming the door. By noon, the neighborhood was a circus. News vans lined the street, reporters knocking on doors, neighbors gathering in clumps to whisper and point. I kept Eli inside, away from the chaos, but he was curious, peeking through the blinds. Are they talking about us? He asked, his voice a mix of fear and excitement. Some of them, I said, pulling him away from the window. But it's not about us anymore. It's about everyone she hurt. He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. Like Mrs. Delgado's roses? Exactly, I said, ruffling his hair. And a lot more. The doorbell rang again. This time, it was a lawyer, a woman in a sharp blazer with a briefcase and a no-nonsense stare. Mr. Carter, I'm Rachel Nguyen. I represent families who've been targeted by the Crestwood hoa. I saw what happened yesterday, and I think we have a case not just against Vanessa Hargrove, but the entire organization. I invited her in, my mind racing. She laid out her plan, a class action lawsuit, pulling in every neighbor with a story of harassment, negligence, or abuse. Vanessa's arrest is the tip of the iceberg, she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. The HOA has been overstepping its authority for years. Illegal fines, discriminatory practices, even forging signatures on board votes. We can take them down. What about Eli? I asked, my voice tight. He's not just a case. He's my son. She nodded, her eyes softening. I know. And what happened to him is the heart of this. We'll make sure the world knows what she did and what the whole let her do. I glanced at Eli, who was listening from the doorway, his chair silent on the hardwood. What do you think, Rocket Man? I asked. He hesitated, then rolled forward. If it stops people like her, I'm in. Rachel smiled, a rare crack in her professional armor. Then let's get to work. The next week was a blur. Rachel's team moved fast, gathering statements from neighbors, pulling hoa records, and building a case that painted Crestwood as a dictatorship under Vanessa's rule. The news cycle didn't let up Punch, which was still trending, with memes, late-night show jokes, and even a viral song remixing Vanessa's screams. I shielded Eli from most of it, but he caught snippets, laughing at a cartoon of Vanessa drowning in a punch bowl. She's not so scary anymore, he said one night, his voice lighter than I'd heard in months. But Vanessa wasn't gone. She was out on bail, holed up in her mansion at the end of the street. Her lawyer spinning stories of her being the real victim. She posted on X, a rambling thread about mob justice and ungrateful neighbors. It backfired. Hundreds of replies called her out, sharing more stories of her cruelty. A single mom posted about Vanessa threatening to evict her for missing a meeting. A veteran said she'd find him for flying a flag on Memorial Day. Each story was a match, and Crestwood was burning. I met with neighbors in our living room, a makeshift war room. Mrs. Delgado brought her mac and cheese, but also a folder of letters Vanessa had sent her, each one colder than the last. Others came with their own evidence, photos of fines, threatening emails, even recordings of Vanessa berating people at meetings. She called my daughter's lemonade stand a public nuisance, one dad said, his voice shaking. She was 6. We end this, I said, looking around the room. Not just Vanessa, the whole system. They nodded, their faces a mix of fear and resolve. We weren't just fighting for Eli anymore. We were fighting for all of us. The HOAS emergency meeting was set for Friday night at the community center, a squat brick building that felt like Vanessa's throne room. Rachel warned me it'd be a circus board members trying to save face, neighbors picking sides, reporters sniffing for blood. I didn't care. I was going, and I was bringing Eli. He deserved to see this through. We arrived early, the parking lot already packed. Ellie's chair rolled smoothly up the ramp, his hands steady now. His rocket ship hoodie back on like armor. The room was packed, standing room only, with cameras flashing and phones raised. The board sat at a long table, their nameplates polished, but their faces pale. Marjorie and Todd were gone, their seats empty. But 3 others remained holdouts loyal to Vanessa's vision. The meeting started with a statement, read by a nervous man named Greg, the vice president. The Crestwood HOA condemns the actions of Vanessa Hargrove and is conducting an internal review. His voice droned on, full of corporate jargon meant to deflect blame. I stood, my hand on Ellie's shoulder. Enough, I said, my voice cutting through the room. Heads turned, cameras swiveled. You don't get to review this. Vanessa assaulted my son in front of all of you. You let her run this place like a dictator, and you did nothing. Step down, or we'll tear this HOA apart in court. Greg stammered, his papers shaking. Mr. Carter, we're trying to. Trying. I stepped forward, my voice rising. You fine people for their grief, their poverty, their differences. You let Vanessa make my son feel like he didn't belong. You're not trying, you're complicit. The room erupted cheers, shouts, a few boos. A woman stood, her voice shaking. My son's autistic. Vanessa said his stimming made the neighborhood uncomfortable. I'm done with this HOA. Another neighbor rose. She threatened to foreclose on my house because I couldn't pay a $200 fine. My wife was in the hospital. One by one, they stood, their stories pouring out like a flood. The board shrank in their seats, their authority crumbling. Greg tried to speak, but the crowd drowned him out. Eli squeezed my hand, his eyes bright. They're fighting, Dad, he whispered. They're waking up, I said. Rachel stood beside me, her briefcase open. We're filing a class action lawsuit against the Crestwood HOA, she announced. Her voice clear and sharp. Negligence, harassment, and enabling assault. We have evidence, emails, recordings, witnesses. Step down now, or we'll see you in court. The room roared. Greg dropped his gavel, his face ashen. The other board members whispered frantically, then stood, one by one, muttering resignations. The crowd cheered, phones flashing, the moment captured for the world to see. I looked at Eli, his smile small but fierce. This wasn't just justicide, was a reckoning. But as we left the center, the air heavy with victory, I saw a figure in the shadows across the street. Vanessa, standing by her car, her face pale but her eyes burning. She wasn't done, and neither was I. The air outside the community center was electric, charged with the raw energy of a crowd that had finally shed its chains. The Crestwood HOA board had crumbled, their resignations echoing like falling dominoes. But I could still feel Vanessa Hargrove's shadow lingering in the distance. Her silhouette by her car, her eyes burning with defiance, was a warning. This wasn't over. Not for her, and not for me. I pushed Ellie's wheelchair down the ramp, his hands steady on the armrests. His rocket ship hoodie a beacon in the fading light. The fight had started with him, and it would end with him in our terms. The days that followed were a storm. The news vans didn't leave Crestwood, they multiplied, their antennas sprouting like weeds along our quiet streets. Reporters knocked on doors, neighbors gave interviews, and the punchwitch hashtag became a rallying cry for HOA victims nationwide. Posts on X flooded my feed, stories of fines for faded shutters, threats over kids' chalk drawings, even a family evicted for planting a vegetable garden. Vanessa's face was everywhere, her punch-soaked scream frozen in memes and late-night monologues. But I kept Eli away from the screens, letting him focus on his model rockets and the mac and cheese misses. Delgado dropped off every other day. He didn't need to see the world dissect his pain. Rachel Nguyen, our lawyer, was relentless. Her office became a war room, stacked with whole records, neighbor testimonies, and grainy videos from the picnic. We've got enough to bury them, she said one afternoon, her eyes gleaming over a stack of emails. Vanessa wasn't just cruel, she was sloppy. Forged signatures, backdated fines, even threats to board members who questioned her. This is a gold mine. What about Eli? I asked, my voice tight. How do we make sure this doesn't define him? Rachel leaned back, her gaze softening. We make it about more than him. We make it about every kid, every family, who's been told they don't belong. Ellie's story is the spark, but the fire's for everyone. I nodded, glancing at Eli, who was building a rocket in the corner of the room, his tongue poking out in concentration. He was listening, even if he didn't show it. Do it, I said. Burn it down. The lawsuit moved fast, fueled by the public's outrage. Rachel filed the class action suit against the Crestwood HOA, naming Vanessa as the primary defendant, but dragging the entire board into the mess. Negligence, harassment, assault, and systemic abuse of power charges were a sledgehammer, and Crestwood felt every blow. Neighbors who'd stayed silent for years came forward, their stories piling up like kindling. A single dad told of Vanessa fining him for his son's skateboard ramp, calling it an eyesore. A retiree shared how she'd been threatened with foreclosure over a missed HOA fee during her husband's funeral. Each story chipped away at the HOA's facade, exposing the rot beneath its polished exterior. Vanessa didn't go quietly. From her mansion, she launched a counteroffensive, her lawyers spinning tales of her emotional distress and unfair persecution. She gave an interview to a local news station, her face scrubbed of punch but still dripping with arrogance. I was trying to maintain standards, she said, her voice quivering with rehearsed sincerity. This community trusted me to keep it beautiful, safe, and that Manjam's Carter attacked me in front of everyone. He's the real danger. The interview backfired. Clips of her smug face went viral, juxtaposed with footage of Eli, his wheelchair soaked, his eyes wide with shock. Ex-users tore her apart, and even the news anchor couldn't hide her disgust. You're saying a 10-year-old in a wheelchair was a threat to your standards? She asked, her tone sharp. Vanessa stammered, her mask slipping, and the segment cut to commercial. By morning, Punch, which was trending again, with over 5 million posts. But the real battle wasn't online, it was in Crestwood. The HOAS collapse left a void, and people were scared. Some wanted to rebuild, elect a new board, start fresh. Others, like me, wanted it gone for good. We held meetings in my living room, neighbors crowded on couches and folding chairs, passing around coffee and Mrs. Delgado's casseroles. Eli sat in the corner, listening, his hands busy with a rocket kit. What do we do without an HOA? A woman asked, her voice nervous. Who maintains the parks, the streets? We do, I said, standing. We don't need a board to tell us how to be neighbors. We take care of each other, not because of rules, but because it's right. Heads nodded, but doubt lingered. Change is hard, especially when fear's been your landlord for years. Still, the momentum was building. A petition to dissolve the HOA circulated, gathering hundreds of signatures. Rachel used it as leverage, warning the remaining board holdouts, step down or face the courts. One by one, they folded, their resignations piling up like leaves in a storm. Eli was changing, too. The picnic had scarred him, but it also lit something inside him. He stopped hiding his chair, rolling through the neighborhood with his head high, his rocket ship hoodie a quiet defiance. Kids who'd once stared now waved, some even asking about his rockets. One afternoon, a girl with pigtails ran up, holding a paper airplane. Can you make it go to the moon? She asked, grinning. Eli laughed, the sound bright and unbroken. Gotta add thrusters first, he said, pulling a marker from his pocket to sketch a design on her plane. I watched from the porch, my chest tight with pride. Vanessa had tried to make him small, but he was growing bigger every day. Still, I saw the shadows in his eyes. At night, when the house was quiet, he'd ask questions that cut deeper than any fine. Will she come back, Dad? He asked one evening, his voice soft as he lay in bed, his rocket blanket pulled to his chin. She might try, I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. But she can't hurt you anymore. Not while I'm here. He nodded, but his fingers traced the edge of his chair, parked beside the bed. What if people still think I'm different? Then you show them different is powerful, I said. You're not your chair, Eli. You're the kid who dreams of stars, and no one can take that from you. He smiled, small but real, and I kissed his forehead, leaving him to dream of galaxies. But as I closed his door, I felt the weight of my own words. Vanessa wasn't the only enemy. The world was full of people who'd judge him, shrink him, try to box him in. I couldn't fight them all, but I could teach him to fight, and I could make damn sure Crestwood never forgot what happened when you tried to break a kid like Eli. The trial came 6 months later, a cold January morning that turned Crestwood into a media circus. The county courthouse was packed, benches creaking under the weight of neighbors, reporters, and curious onlookers. Vanessa stood at the defendant's table, her platinum bob replaced by a dull ponytail, her tailored blazer swapped for a gray suit that hung awkwardly on her frame. She looked smaller, but her eyes still burned with defiance, darting around the room like a cornered animal. I sat in the front row, Eli beside me, his chair polished to a shine. He'd insisted on coming, his jaw set with a determination that made him look older than 10. "I want her to see me," he'd said that morning, his voice steady. "I'm not scared," I didn't argue. He'd earned this. Rachel stood before the judge, her voice clear and unyielding. "Your Honor, Vanessa Hargrove didn't just assault Eli Carter. She targeted a child because of his disability, in front of witnesses, with intent to humiliate. She used her position as HOA president to enforce a culture of fear, fining and threatening anyone who didn't fit her vision of perfect. This wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern." Vanessa's lawyer, a slick man with a comb-over, argued her side. "My client was under immense pressure," he said, his voice oily. "The HOA demanded high standards, and Ms. Hargrove was simply enforcing them. The incident with the lemonade was an accident, and Mr. Carter's reaction assaulting her in public caused her severe emotional and professional harm." I stood, my voice cutting through the room. "Emotional harm?" She poured lemonade on my son's lap, knowing he's in a wheelchair, knowing he couldn't just walk away. She mocked him, shamed him, and smiled while she did it. "Don't talk to me about harm." The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, banged her gavel. "Mr. Carter, sit down. You'll have your chance." Rachel called witness Susnibers, the teenager who'd filmed the incident, even Mrs. Delgado, who recounted Vanessa's fines on her roses with tears in her eyes. The footage played on a courtroom screen, Vanessa's smug oops echoing as Ellie's face crumpled. The room went silent, the weight of her cruelty undeniable. When it was Vanessa's turn, she took the stand, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "I was trying to keep Crestwood beautiful, to protect our community. James Carter attacked me, humiliated me, turned me into a monster online." The judge leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Ms. Hargrove, are you claiming the lemonade was an accident?" Vanessa hesitated, her eyes flicking to the crowd. "Yes, Your Honor. It slipped." "Liar," Ellie's voice rang out, small but fierce. The courtroom gasped, heads turning to him. His hands gripped his chair, his face flushed. "You looked at me. You laughed. You wanted me to feel bad." The judge didn't scold him. Instead, she turned to Vanessa, her expression hard. "A child just called you out, Ms. Hargrove. Care to revise your statement?" Vanessa's facade cracked, her lips trembling. I was frustrated. He didn't belong at a family event. His chair, it was in the way. The room erupted, murmurs turning to shouts. The judge slammed her gavel. "Enough. Ms. Hargrove, your own words convict you. I've seen the footage, read the testimonies, heard the stories. You didn't slip. You attacked a child with intent, and you used your authority to terrorize this community for years." Vanessa's face paled, her hands clutching the stand. The judge continued, her voice like steel. "You are sentenced to 18 months in county jail, with mandatory community service upon release to 100 hours at a disability advocacy center, where you will learn what you failed to understand. You will also pay restitution to the Carter family and every plaintiff in the class action suit." Vanessa gasped, her lawyers scrambling to object, but the gavel fell again. Case closed. The bailiff moved toward her, cuffs ready. She didn't scream this time, just stood, head bowed, as they led her away. The crowd didn't cheer. They watched in silence, the weight of justice settling over the room. Eli squeezed my hand, his eyes bright. "She can't hurt anyone now," he whispered. Not here, I said, pulling him close. Not anymore. The HOA was dissolved a month later, the final nail driven by Rachel's lawsuit. The class action suit won millions in damages, split among the plaintiffs, but more importantly, it ended Crestwood's reign of fear. The community center, once Vanessa's throne room, was repurposed. We tore down the old HOA sign, its gold letters tossed into a dumpster, and replaced it with a new one, the Eli Center for Belonging. A place for kids, families, anyone who'd ever felt pushed out. No fees, no rules, just open doors. The grand opening was a sunny April day, the air warm with the promise of spring. Eli cut the ribbon, his hands steady on the oversized scissors, his smile brighter than the balloons bobbing above. The crowd cheered neighbors, kids, even a few reporters who'd stuck around for the story's end. Inside, the center was alive with color, murals of rockets and stars, craft tables, a ramped stage for performances. At the center was a wall with Ellie's name in bold letters. A quote beneath it, "You're not what holds you back, you are what lifts you up." A boy in a soccer jersey approached Eli, holding a paper rocket. "Can you show me how to make it fly?" he asked, shy but curious. Eli grinned, rolling toward a table. "Only if you help me add boosters." The boy laughed, and soon a group of kids gathered, their voices blending into a joyful hum. I watched from a distance, my chest tight with something deeper than pride hope. Mrs. Delgado stood beside me, her eyes misty. "He's changing this place," she said, her voice soft. "Just like you did." "He's the one who started it," I said. I just followed his lead. Months later, I saw Vanessa again. It was a quiet morning, the kind where the world feels soft around the edges. I was at the Eli Center, helping set up for a rocket building workshop. She was outside, in an orange vest, sweeping the sidewalk as part of her community service. Her hair was limp, her face bare of makeup, her pride long gone. She saw me and froze, her broom still. I walked over, my steps slow, deliberate. "How's it feel?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Being on the other side." She looked down, her hands tightening on the broom. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she mumbled. "You did," I said. "But it doesn't matter now. You're not in charge anymore." She nodded, her eyes empty, and went back to sweeping. I didn't gloat, didn't linger. I just walked back inside, where Eli was laughing with a group of kids, his rocket soaring across the room on a string. Vanessa was a ghost now, a shadow that couldn't touch us. Crestwood changed. The lawns were still manicured, but the rules were gone. Neighbors helped each other, not out of fear, but because they wanted to. Kids played in the streets, their bikes and chalk drawings untouched by fines. The Eli Center became a hub, a place where differences weren't just tolerated, they were celebrated. Eli led workshops, teaching kids to build rockets, his chair a part of him, but not his whole story. He was the kid who dreamed of stars, and Crestwood finally saw him for it. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Eli looked up at the sky, his eyes tracing the constellations. "Dad," he said, his voice thoughtful, "do you think I can still be an astronaut?" I smiled, my heart full. "Kid, you're already flying. The stars are just catching up." He grinned, his hand resting on his chair, no longer hiding. And in that moment, I knew Vanessa had tried to break him, but she'd only made him stronger. She'd left ashes, but Eli had built something new from them, a world where no one had to hide. The lesson wasn't just for Eli. It was for all of us. The world will try to tell you who you are, what you're worth, based on what it sees our chair, your scars, your differences. But those aren't your limits, they're your strength. Vanessa thought she could define Eli, shrink him, make him invisible. She was wrong. And when you stand up to people like her, when you refuse to let their cruelty win, you don't just fight for yourself, you fight for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. So here's the call: never let anyone make you small. Speak up, stand tall, and if someone tries to push you down, push back. Because the world doesn't change with silence, it changes with fire. And sometimes, all it takes is one spark to burn a kingdom down.